Welcome to the Reforged Marriage podcast with Giff and Chad, while we talk about being men with our wives. And today's topic, we're going to talk about guys asking their wives for sex and basically just how do you initiate sexual activity with your wife. But before we get into that, we want to recognize, I guess, a little bit here. Chad is just on his tail end, just coming straight out of his first time coaching at Reforged Marriage, not on the calls with me, but doing his own call, keeping an eye on 7 guys as he's like walking them through this process of having like a low sex marriage to really showing up as men in their marriages, including in their bedrooms. Chad, how was that, man?
It was great. I've tried so hard to always be a part of the team and shy away from being an authority, I guess I'll say. I see myself as a practitioner, less
Right.
a historian.
What do we know?
Yeah.
What do we know?
I don't like acting like I know much, but it was a really cool experience being able to help some guys kind of unplug from a lot of the conditioning and stuff that they've learned over the years.
You've talked in the past about like guys that you know in your personal life, right? You see their marriage, there's no attraction, there's no edge they're bringing, and the marriage is just on the ropes, and the guy's like, well, I just need to pray about it, and you're like trying to get it in his head or something, and they're just not receptive. What is it like to have 7 guys who are just chomping at the bit? They're feeling the pain and they want change and they're listening and ready.
There was definitely some proud moments where I saw guys get it, put things into practice, and get some small wins. And it was
Some pretty big wins.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Very, very long droughts were broken in this
Yeah.
cohort. Several of them. 9 months, 1 year, 6 months, several times broken.
And even more than that, like, I mean, those are the things where it's like, okay, here's some objective measurements, right? And we men, that's really important to us. We want to be able to measure, okay, is there actual improvement? But even more than that, seeing the kind of ethos that they have towards their life changing. You can't market that, say, oh, get this, because it'll give you a new ethos. But that's what actually matters.
Yeah, seeing the change from, guys believing how they react is someone else's problem. And actually being able to get to the point where they're seeing their own power and not being afraid to acknowledge that. It's pretty cool seeing them start to take that corner. Even become aware of that, of the reality of that, and being able to start.
Now, you said something at the very first call that I actually clipped out and posted all over the internet. You were giving a little bit of a pep talk, right?
Yeah.
So these guys were coming in the call and they were saying, oh yeah, I asked them this question. Okay, what would you like to get out of this course? And they were saying things like, well, right now we have sex maybe once a month. And if we could have it once a week, that would be amazing. Right. And like
Right.
you had multiple, it's like, could I please have a little more? Just please. I'm not asking much. And then you got on, what do you tell them?
Oh, I really felt like they didn't know what was possible, right? Like they weren't reaching for the right stuff because they were still coming from like a real needy place of, if I just get this number of sex a month or a year or whatever, I'll be okay. Instead of really thinking, what would it be like to have a new normal in my relationship where, that this sexy vibe is present all the time. Like I don't even think a lot of them even understand the possibility of living like that, right? Where getting laid once in a while isn't the goal. Having that deep, connected, sexy vibe with a woman that just thinks you're the shit, right? And feeling that is so much more powerful than just getting laid once in a while.
Right. And it just fits with the kind of life that you have everywhere.
Right. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
bleeds out in all aspects of you.
Yeah, I think the way you put it on the call is like, I want y'all to broaden your horizons a little bit on what's
Yeah.
possible.
If that's one thing I can
Give
bring,
us
I
a
like to
Braveheart speech.
that's what I like to drop little stories every once in a while, be like, "No, it can be really wild, guys, I promise you."
And I think a lot of guys are afraid to hope, right?
Yeah.
Because of the pain, right? Who wants to get their hopes dashed? And so, as a protective measure, they'll kind of cut themselves off at the knees so they don't risk hoping. Have you noticed some of that?
Yeah, I it's almost like they don't really think that a wild sex life that they see out on the interwebs and in the porn places of the dark spots of the web is like all that stuff can be created with a woman you love in a really awesome way. And it's like they're almost afraid of tapping into that with their wife or something. Or I don't know what the
Maybe
whole
they're afraid of it in themselves. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm a nice guy, right? I don't that's other side of things, that like kind of aggressive, passionate, not afraid of the consequences, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead kind of guy.
well, I think it's they're afraid that pushing those limits are gonna break the little bit that they get.
Mm.
Right? There and it's and that's what's the whole cool thing about this course, and that's sort of what I figured out being a coach this one time is tasting the mentality of not being afraid of owning that
Mm.
that fiery side of yourself and what you want, you know?
Well, let's get into, I think, what I picked as our main topic here.
Okay.
And that's the idea of the guy asking his wife for sex and afraid that she's going to say no. Because one of the guys talked about, especially, he put it this way: is like, I'm subconsciously afraid of her disapproval cannon, that
Yeah.
I'm she's gonna fire at me. And he's like, so he used the example. He even said, I went up and I said, hey, do you want to put the do not disturb sign up and lock the door?
Mhm.
And she was actually kind of helping him out. She's like, I don't know, do you want to?
Right.
Right? Like, talk to us about that. That like, do you wanna?
Well,
Like,
I like uh, the the example you're talking about. I loved his, colorful language there and riffed on that a little bit just because disapproval canon is a pretty heavy words in the way he described that, right? It's like, why do you see the
scary.
disapproval like a cannon literally shooting at your face? It was,
I
like
think you asked him, you said, "Will you die?"
yeah, like, what are you afraid of? Like, what and I tried to give him a few examples, like in ways he would engage with his wife, and she might try to shoot his head off. Like, if you respond directly, taking those shots to the face, and you aren't affected, you aren't bothered, like, what are you holding on to? What are you losing? What are you actually losing and standing up to that, right? And owning what you want there. Are you losing anything? Did you die? Or are you actually gaining something?
Well, I think some of the guys, they can't even imagine an alternative to approaching their wife with this, "May I have a cookie, please?" kind of way of initiating sex, because the only alternative in their heads is sex now.
Well,
This
yeah.
like caveman kinda domineering, just barreling over her. And they don't have a third option in their heads.
Yeah, it's like a huge fear of disrupting whatever the status quo is that they've built in their life around sex and how they have sex with their wife. And they're just terrified of disrupting that sex flow without really thinking about how awesome it could be on the other side when you engage it directly.
So you talked about the phrase and the intonation. Do you wanna put up the do not disturb sign and lock the door? And you're like, "Say that differently." How could he say that differently? And what would it mean?
Let's put up the do not disturb sign, lock the door. You lock the door, right?
What's the difference there? What's going on?
Well, he's not asking for permission, right? He's not putting it's not, I'm almost there, right? He's still asking for permission instead of just being, this is happening. This is what I want. Let's do this.
So
Um,
a lot of guys when they first hear that will be like, "Oh, well that's like what about consent? Like what about like you're not giving her a chance to say no if she doesn't want to? Are you talk to me about that? Is that what that's doing?"
no, you're not pushing anything. You're stating what you want clearly, and owning it and being authentic in that desire. And there's nothing wrong with that. We're not pushing anything on anybody.
Mm.
Our wives still.
She's like, "No."
He says, "No," you're like, "Okay," it's like you just you move on, you pivot, but you don't ask for permission, right?
Right.
To be your authentic self.
Right, and I think that's the key that a lot of them are missing. They have ask for permission or demand, half coerce, force, you know, and
Yeah,
there's something that isn't either of those, and that's just forthrightly stating what you want.
yeah. Why is that so scary to guys? I can't I that's another thing I learned in this cohort is I take for granted a lot of times. I don't s it I take for granted where I'm at, and there's a lot of guys that are not comfortable owning their own power, owning what they're bringing to the table, even seeing what they're bringing to the table, like owning their own value. And that was a big eye opener for me, and how so much of this course is literally about helping guys make that mental shift to seeing their own value, right? And you're owning your authentic desires and what you want in your life, right?
So
And it's becoming your sun in your own solar system.
well, and that was a real key with the gentleman who was talking about that, because for him to own his own desire and put it forth, I think he and a lot of other guys were like, well, that's selfish. That's
Yeah.
bad. Like, as if your sexual desire for her is some sort of affront to her, right? There's
Or
this
being
assumption
open
that
about it, being honest about it, being like putting it out and not being afraid to show it off. How
Mm,
are you going to show it off in front of other people if you can't show it off in the private of your own home?
right, right. Just like, hey, I think my wife is hot. I'm
Yeah.
crazy. I'm crazy about her. I think she's awesome. Come here. You
Yeah.
know, that kind of vibe. That what does that actually mean? Because a lot of times they're not quite thinking through and seeing this, that is actually flattering to her.
Very much.
Whereas when you're saying, "Oh, please give me a cookie,"
Right.
that in a way that is demeaning, well, it's demeaning to the sexual experience.
You're disqualifying yourself as being worthy of it. You're you're disqualifying yourself to her. You're basically telling her you're not the badass that you're acting like. You know what I mean? When you do that. Do I have permission to be the badass that you want to sleep with? No girl wants that.
No, and
Are you the badass or not?
well, you're disqualifying yourself, but you're disqualifying your desire, you're disqualifying the act of sex itself.
Yeah.
You're saying that this is a transactional thing that you give me, rather than this is an awesome thing that you and I are gonna have a great time engaging with together. There's a line, I think it was Ryan Stone. I've got his book Dread up there, and a lot of it I don't resonate with, but there's a line that has just stuck with me, and that's women hate sales and they love marketing, right?
Yeah.
This this idea is that if you're trying to like, please do this for me, come on, sign at the dotted line. There's there's not just women. Like everybody kind of hates that, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you're like, "Oh, this is great. We're having a great time. You want to join us?"
Yeah.
That has pull.
It's the demonstrate never explicate line I like so much, right? It's your whole chapter on pursuing status and leveling up in the masculine archetypes and all that become desirable, right? Stop trying to convince her that you are desirable. Become desirable, be
Just
desirable,
act like it.
and then own how desirable you are. Maybe
Well,
flaunt it a little bit.
so I wanted to open up because some of the things you said actually made me think when you were coaching that guy on that, where you pointed out that being polite in that engagement, "Oh, would you please do this for me?" That puts all the responsibility and weight on her.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm gonna
Yep.
"Let's do it, go lock the door," that she actually feels more free to say no even though she's more likely to say no if you do it the first way, she feels more free to say no if you
Yeah.
do it the second way. Talk about that
Right.
a little.
Well, you mean because she's not locked into a different cohort or different contract where you're basically like, I'm gonna pout and you're gonna feel bad if you don't give me the sex that I want? Is
Yeah.
that what
Well, there's that, and then there's just the, like, well, if someone asks real nice and polite, sort of in there is an implied social pressure
Yeah.
to say yes. Whereas if you ask in a I mean, not ask, if you just put yourself out there, it's like, "Hey, I wanna do this," then people feel someone feels a lot less resistance to saying, "Well, hey, I don't wanna do that." It just invites genuine response.
Yeah. Which is what you really want. That's what I was trying to tell the guys. You don't want your wife to give you a blowjob, you want her to want to give you a blowjob. It's the desire you guys want, right? It's it's that's what if you really think about what you want the eyes, you want the desire, you want you want her to just want to tear your clothes off, right?
That
That's what we
locked
want.
eye to eye connection. That
Yeah.
just yeah.
And so yeah, it's more about giving her the freedom to find
Mm,
that desire for you and not have it buried under guilt that of you asking nicely and begging for sex. What do I call it? What the sneaky fucker game, the backdoor approach, the sympathy game, right?
mm.
It's the whole negotiated desire only leads to obligated compliance, right? And so much of these guys are locked into that eternal struggle of that whole negotiating desire dynamic. And that was what the little speech was about in the first call, right? Was there's something else out there. What you guys really want is her just unfettered, pure desire for you. And it's like, well, a lot of like when guys talk about their number of time, how much the number of times they have sex, or like the one guy who just came in, the I don't want to use people's names, but there's a dude who just did a sit rep in the forum who's a year plus into this, who's made a lot of awesome progress, but he's kind of having a come to moment where he's not getting the amount of sex he wants. And he's had a whole post about how sex can't be his metric of success, right? And sex isn't the metric of success, but I do think her desire is
Mm.
a heavy metric
Yeah.
of the health of the relationship itself, right?
Right, right. The female libido can be an excellent barometer of the health of the relationship. With obviously, there's some physical things, there's some hormones, there's stuff like that, but it's something we can't ignore.
Yeah, and sex is even downstream from that desire. Like I like to I think you got to separate the two things cuz that desire manifests in all different sorts of ways that are all
Mm.
awesome. They're all awesome. And that little speech at the end of that first call was just trying to get guys to realize that desire is what you want here, you know? What would it feel like to have your wife really desire you? And I think that's super important because like I think it's important when guys are dating. That's the metrics you
Mm.
want to shoot for. When you're is this girl good? Does she really desire me? And I don't clearly a lot of these married guys don't know what that is even like to begin to use it as a metric. And they're still really stuck in that negotiating for
Right. And then that keys into really the central thing that what this course is about, and I think what we as Christians bring to this conversation in a big way, and that's the idea of the dignity we have in Christ. That
That is separate.
yeah,
That is the metric of our value and how we see ourselves,
right,
right? That's the and then how through that work we become desirable,
right,
and then we foster desire in our relationship with our wife.
yeah.
And I think that desire that comes about from becoming that unstoppable force is an awesome metric for the hotness of our relationship, but it is separate from the value we see in ourselves, the whole dignity piece, the mental point of origin.
So there's a couple things in there, around dignity. One of the big reasons why a guy will not just forthrightly just express his desire to his wife, while he'll hem and haw and hedge and ask, is because he's afraid of the no, right? And so there's almost plausible deniability. "Oh, I didn't really want it. I just was trying to be kind in case you'd want it."
Right.
And so there's plausible deniability, and all in that is the fear of the rejection, the fear
Yeah.
of, as the one guy put it, the disapproval canon. How do guys overcome that fear when they start in that place?
Well, it's would you agree that that fear comes from a lack of self-worth, right? You
Absolutely.
you don't feel internally that you are worthy of it, which is
Well,
why
that's
you're asking.
it goes deep, right? It goes deep into, biological creatures, right? Male creatures want female creatures to think them worthy of mating with them, right?
Yeah,
And so they compete and they show off and you do all the things, and then the girls watch the race and they want the winner.
yeah,
And so there's a sense in which her sexual desire is validating, whether or not, my status is high. And so,
yeah.
it's very natural to feel that way, and it runs deep. But the idea of dignity runs even deeper, and that's the piece that a lot of guys are missing.
Oh, yeah. I agree 100%, and, that's what I found myself trying to get guys to see over and over again throughout this cohort was that sort of seeing themselves as the center of their own universe, right? Being having that feeling that dignity. What is broke that I am being true? What is broke in me that is causing me to feel triggered by this rejection?
Mm,
What is it that I why do I feel unworthy that this rejection is so important to me that kills me so much, right? I had it was asking guys to see that over and over again in different ways, you know. Well, my wife is terrible and so this makes me feel like this. No, why? Why does that trigger you?
right.
Why does that feel so bad for you? Not what is she doing that makes you feel that why are you triggered? And then fix it, all right? Fix what you think is broke.
Well, guys really get stuck in what we say living in her frame.
Yeah,
Right, whether or not she's happy, whether or not she affirms what you're doing, that determines whether or not you're okay with yourself, and they miss in that how much pressure that puts on a woman,
sure.
right? Where you're just like, "Here, would you be the judge, jury, and executioner of my universe, of my
Right,
self-worth, of my sense of whether or not I am worthy before God, man, and the world?" It's like,
right,
"Why don't that honey, why don't we I just put that in your hands?" Like, I mean, she'd run the other way if she was aware that you were doing that. That's a terrible thing. That comes from God. As
right,
Christians, we believe that comes from God, and so you're talking about, like, being the sun in your universe, and I know a lot of Christians will hear that and say, "Wait a second, isn't God supposed to be the sun in your universe?" Absolutely, but you are the one who is stewarding that value in your life. You're not
right. You're
putting that on
responsible
your
for it.
wife or your pastor or anybody else. You are responsible for shepherding, safeguarding, stewarding the dignity that he's entrusted in you.
That light comes from God, but you are responsible for it for sure.
Yeah. So there was an example of this, right? You had a guy sort of setting the stage. We had given guys sort of the playbook of you're gonna approach your wife, you're gonna initiate sex, you're gonna like express desire, and then you're actually gonna expect for her to say, "No, I'm not in the mood. I'm pushing back at some level." And then you're then going to transmute that desire, meaning I'm gonna go find something else that I can go out with some fire and
Yeah.
still have a great time, still express, the man that I am. And in this case, the guy was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna go play my bass guitar
Oh, yeah.
and just do it all out." But there was a little trap in there that that particular guy was vulnerable to. Tell me about that.
Well, I warned him to be careful about weaponizing, withdrawing his attention, right? Like, are you really passionate about what you're doing here, right? Are you not just being butthurt and pivoting to something else, being like, I'll show you, I'll just withdraw myself completely, because I do think that's something that a lot of guys will instinctively fall into. And I praised him. You weren't sulking about the rejection, you know, but just in the way he was talking about it, it was a little bit like, yeah, and I was like, if you change your mind, I'll be over here kind of thing, and that's fine. But I just wanted to really point out to him, is this pivot something you are doing out of genuine passion for your hobby? Or are you using withdrawal as a weapon to punish her? Are you still engaged in negotiations, right?
Mm.
Is your core still engaged in negotiating for sex? Or are
If
you
you
truly outcome independent?
if you do that, if you're saying, "I'm going to punish you for not giving me the sex that I want by being sulky or whatever, by withdrawing," then you're still reinforcing that narrative where this is the sort of thing you should do out of fear of punishment because it's not valuable in itself.
If you reject me, there is a new passive aggressive covert contract in place, right? You're
Mm.
still using guilt as a ruler to manipulate what you want, right? And to really think about that and be honest with yourself about why you're doing the things you're doing, because you're missing the whole point. If you aren't truly enjoying the outcome independence, all right, and happily moving to something else because you're truly okay with a no, right? You're missing the lesson that was trying to be learned in that field exercise.
Well, it's hard. It's hard to go from that scarcity mindset to that abundance mindset.
Yeah, I'm seeing that.
What were some of the parts with these guys where you were most proud of?
Well, there are a couple guys who are just like, I don't want to call them teddy bears, but they're just like super big-hearted nice guys. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Just and it was um this one guy who was definitely solid nice guy. One thing I was really proud of him for was when he made a pivot in the date night exercise
Mm.
where his wife shot down his whole plan. I mean, I'll be honest, I've never understood why you'd want to take your wife to an escape room unless she's some kind of like, I don't know. It's like, let's lock ourselves in a room, and I've never understood escape rooms. But my point is he made all these plans. And when he informed her what they were doing, she was very anxious, and he didn't like take that as shooting his plans down and like you're bucking my authority of the plan I want to enact here, right? And like he pivoted, and he was like, he read the room, he read his wife's sort of reaction to what was going on. He stuck with his original goal of creating closeness and having a good time with his wife, and he just calmly pivoted to a different activity at home, some sort of game that they played together or something, and they had an awesome time, and he created the experience that he was after in the first place. And I was just proud of him being able to kind of read the room, not get destroyed and shot down with her rejection of his date night plans, and pivot it into an activity that worked better for her and their situation, their whatever, and make an awesome time of it, and come out of it with everything that was intended for the exercise. So
So
I was
how do you
proud of
just
his ability to pivot.
mm. Well, how do you talk to a guy who says, "Well, if you're pivoting, then you're just putting her in charge and you're not leading."
Not necessarily, because he had a goal that he was leading her to. The goal wasn't the specifics of the date, right? The goal was leading her through whatever that experience was. And part of that was pivoting that plan and continuing to lead to where the intended outcome that he wanted was, right? Staying the thermostat in the house, or he was still setting the temperature in the house. He wasn't reacting to her and adjusting everything to her to what she wanted. It was he still had a goal that he was headed towards and was
Mm.
able to get there with a different plan, basically.
What about the other guys who are timid at the beginning and they're like, "No, no, well, that's in being in that situation where she's gonna shoot down my plan is why I start the whole process of, well, where do you wanna go on a date tonight, honey?"
But what do you mean? Like, why?
It's like they don't wanna be the ones to plan because they might get shot down, and they would see that as, "Oh, well, he had to pivot, she shot it down, so head that off at the pass by just kinda just
Ask her what she wants.
asking her what she wants to do and
Well,
doing
he's
that."
not he's not asking her he's not asking her to plan the whole evening. He's just able to pivot the plan. He's able to adjust his plan. He's not locked into, uh, a set of actions. He has a goal of having a good time with his wife, and he's still leading her there. The plan is still his plan. He's not asking for her to take up the reins and lead it somewhere else. He's just aware of the little pieces that, maybe his wife just wasn't comfortable with the escape room or whatever. There was other factors at play there. He was able to see the outward forces at play here, not take his wife's rejection as like a disapproval cannon on his plan, right? Not get blown away and keep headed towards to the goal that he wanted. He's
Yeah.
still leading.
Well, and that actually is what good leadership is the ability to read the room, see what morale looks like, see the new situation on the ground, and adjust for what is best for the mission at all times. Like,
Right,
that's
without he didn't pout, he didn't sulk, he didn't, just quit. "You're not letting me lead, I quit. Fine, we'll do whatever you want," right? He was like, All right, well, this isn't working. Let's do this instead." And that's actually hard to do.
yeah.
That's hard leadership stuff to do. So that's why I was kind of proud of that pivot moment for him.
Mm.
And the realization that he got was, wow, the goal here was actually creating this experience with my wife that was rewarding for both of us. And we both walked out of this feeling closer and a little more connected.
What were some ways just in the experience of taking these 7 guys that you took through this journey, how did it change you, or how did you grow from it?
Well, one, I mean, I guess I learned that just based on their feedback, that I do have some knowledge here to share with folks.
Just a bit. Just a bit. Maybe you shouldn't keep your light under a bushel?
That yeah, that, like, I've said this 100 times, like, I've always just wanted to create this, like, fight club that I wanna be a part of, right? But I'm always been hesitant to stand at the front of it and be like, "This is the way, guys," because, like, I don't think there's really, like, a clear path for everyone to follow
Mm,
to figure this stuff out. And so I'm a little hesitant to be like, "You gotta do this the way I did it," which is how I've done it in the past, right?
right.
And, because guys have different wives and different places and different times of their life and different seasons with kids and different all these different factors at play, right? And I think this experience has really shown me that the key here is the mental shift to outcome independence, understanding a person's own dignity, moving towards that. I keep saying putting yourself first, even though that doesn't sound good, but moving towards that, putting yourself first, kind of in the way you approach your own life. Just sort of helping guys unplug from this conditioning they've grown up with to get some sort of awareness of what actually works, right? To get a taste of it. Like that's the whole goal here. They don't have to learn everything. I don't have to try to teach them 100 things. It's just this first step that everything else is built on of making that mental shift to being your own mental point of origin.
I loved when I looked at some of the recordings of your calls, I loved how you would have them do one of these exercises in the course. Take your wife on a date that you've planned, initiate initiate sex like this while expecting to be rejected, taking on this difficult house project. There's all sorts of things where they're stepping into leadership, stepping into extreme ownership of their lives.
Yeah.
And they would come back with this field report and then you would respond, how did it feel to be that guy?
Yeah. And I started doing that like halfway through the course, and then I did it for all the rest of them, where I would actually role play it a little bit and be like, here's how you used to do it. Here's how you would respond, right? Here's how she would react. And I'd try to speak to how that would hit them in the moment, how they would feel, right? And then it would be like, now you've learned this new way. Here's what you said this time. Same situation, but you said it this way. You approached it with this demeanor, with this kind of attitude, approach to it. How did that feel different? And then be like, which guy do you want to be? You know, which
And then how would they respond? Would they just be like, "Well, yeah, I wanna be the other guy."
no, no. I mean, I even would have them come back on the calls and it'd be like, well, you told me what would sexy Chad do? And I want to be sexy Chad. It
Yeah,
was
they like, there was fire to it, right? They're like, "Oh, I never wanna go back. I never wanna go back to acting like that guy. I wanna act like this guy feels so good."
it was a really effective way of demonstrating the difference between those two mentalities
Mm.
and seeing it, feeling the difference between what those two mentalities feel like. What have them really think about what they're afraid of and what are you actually losing by being authentic and and taking this direct approach. What are you actually losing and what is it worth to you to live this way? And they're like, this is it. This is actually is it.
If they can fall in love with acting that way, just having that sexy, confident vibe where they're, as, my old coach Mark Kweppett calls it, making love to life.
And they're getting a taste of that in this course.
And
That's what this course does.
if they can fall in love with that feeling regardless of the results,
Yeah.
then theirs is the earth and all that's in it,
Yeah.
and they will be men.
That's what I learned. That there's what I learned in this cohort was it's awesome to give guys a taste of that because that's what they build everything else on.
Well, you get spiritual, right? Where you look at that, it's like, I mean, what are we talking about? I feel like, I don't know, like looking at the Bible, like, and God made man in his own image. Like he went down into this clay and formed this form and breathed the breath of life into it. And I was like, I don't know, I feel like that a little bit. It's like, behold the man. Behold these guys who are like taking charge of their lives, who are leading their families, who are engaging their wives like with like sexual fire and are just not looking back. It's beautiful.
It's because I can hear it in the response on the calls, just sort of like the midlife awakening that it's causing. And I can lay in my bed at night and I can think about it and just be like, this guy sees a better way. He feels a better version of himself in there that he wants to become, right? And I can feel the effects that that is having immediately in his own family dynamic. And I'm excited about, as a Christian guy, I'm really excited about where that goes when you have that when you have that strength at the center of a family, right? Where where you're losing the resentment, all the stuff that's kind of in the way of everyone being their authentic selves, and how much power that gives the wives, how much power that gives the children to really be in tune with the Holy Spirit, be able to follow like what their calling is on their own life, and how much power is being introduced back into that small little family dynamic and all these places all over the world, right? It's pretty cool because I think that's like real life change happening. Like that's a real life change spark that's happening. And there's something different than that than hearing a sermon on Sunday, talking about that sermon in a prayer group on Wednesday night, right? You're just you're rehashing the same thing, and people can take little pieces of it here and there, but this is like real tire hits the road stuff
Mm.
where changes happen, affect other people, make families better, and everyone prospers because of that work that that man is doing.
I mean, it's really bringing the gospel and the grace of God into the nitty gritty all over. It's like,
Yeah.
pray without ceasing, right? I mean, it's that kind of thing, and everything that you do, every action that you take, you're owning it 100%. You're unleashing the fire of your heart, the fire of the love of God
Yeah.
into all of that.
Just with the struggle with
It's
my own
wild.
kind of, I was talking about, I guess you could call it imposter syndrome, where I'm, I'm like, man, do I really got something to stand up and talk to these guys about? Or rather than be like, my wife coaches me a lot too. She's a massive support system for me and a lot of this kind of stuff. And she really just kind of pulled me aside and was like, hey, this is like, you can't stop doing this. Like, I don't whatever it is that you're doing, you have to keep doing because like I really believe that you are affecting people here, whether you see it or not. Like this is your the little bit that you're helping these guys see is bringing about change in an awesome way. And she's very adamant about me continuing.
Well, I mean, like I've said before, I mean, I've become a redemption junkie
Yeah.
doing this stuff. It's like and you'll get to where you get on that first call and you're seeing the sort of things that they're saying, and you're like, "Oh, I see what could happen here. I
Yeah.
I wanna see it. I wanna see it so bad." You gotta be careful because you gotta be out we have to be outcome independent too. We can't be trying to
Yeah.
control these guys and, like, control their story with our own power, Heck, God warns about that, right? We need to let him have the increase, him have the glory. If we're trying to, like, manhandle these guys into change, then they're not gonna become men.
I think I read somewhere that like 87% of men will buy self-help books, go through training courses, do all this stuff, but it's something like 4% actually do the work and
Right.
bring about positive change. And I've likened I'll always call this whole trying to unplug guys from the matrix, I'll call it like Civil War triage because I've just had so little luck over the years. And I also feel like there's a lot of guys who just for some reason or whatever lack the ability to be introspective, like really look at themselves and fix things rather than always seeing themselves as a victim of the world. Some guys just can't get past that. But this this cohort was really awesome because I guess you are funneling in guys that have hit some sort of rock bottom or something where they are really desperate for
They're motivated.
they're motivated. And so it was the first time that worked with guys like this where I really saw stuff happen because they're motivated. They have a great desire to change things and how it's working in their life now. And to be pretty
Well,
cool.
it's awesome stuff. And I don't know. I mean, it's a side business for me, but it's also I see it as a ministry. I
Yeah.
absolutely see it as ministry because lives are changing and it changes, as you say, change the man, you change her life, you change the
Yeah.
kid's life, and at scale, you change churches, you change countries, communities. Our guy, our Slovenian guy over
Yeah.
Nate, he talks about I wanna get this happening over there because this is gonna increase the GDP of my country. Like,
That's
and I love his ambition, and I love what he sees, like, the power, that God has put in men that's just waiting to be
that's
unlocked.
thinking big.
Yeah.
I love that. Good
Well,
change.
Chad, it's been awesome. This cohort was amazing. I'm deeply grateful and super pumped and looking forward to many in the future.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, gentlemen, thanks for joining us for this episode. If you want to learn a little bit more about Reforged Marriage, what we're doing, look at the link. You can go to reforgedmarriage.com and join us. Join us and see your life change, see your sex life change, see your world change. See y'all in the next
Amen,
one.
sir. Later, folks.